Welcome to MCP-gen, the fastest way to connect any REST API to Claude Desktop, Cursor, or any MCP client. In this presentation, we'll cover what it does, how it works, and how to get started in under 5 minutes. If you've ever tried to build a model context protocol server for a real REST API, you know it's not trivial. You need input validation with XOD, structured error handling, authentication setup, and most importantly, tool descriptions that actually make sense to an LLM. That's easily a day or two of boilerplate work, and when the API evolves, you're doing it again. MCP, the Model Context Protocol, is rapidly becoming the standard way to connect AI assistants to external tools. Think of it as USB for AI. An MCP server exposes tools that LLMs can call in a standardized way. MCP-gen automates the hardest part of building these servers. MCP-gen takes your OpenAPI specification, the same spec you probably already have for your API documentation, and turns it into a fully functional TypeScript MCP server. No more writing XOD schemas by hand. No more guessing how to structure error handling. Just point it at your spec, and you get a server that speaks MCP. Here's the comparison that matters most. The time difference is dramatic, 30 seconds versus 2 days. But it's not just speed. Manual MCP server building means writing XOD schemas by hand, implementing error handling from scratch, figuring out authentication, and crafting tool descriptions that make sense to an LLM. MCP-gen handles all of that automatically from the spec you already have. Getting started takes 3 steps. First, get your OpenAPI 3.0 spec. Most modern APIs provide one, or you can generate one from your code using tools like Fern, Swagger, or XOD. Second, run MCP-gen with your spec path, output directory, and auth type. Add the validate flag to run a type check. Third, install dependencies. Build and run with your API credentials. That's it. Your LLM can now call your entire API. Here's the full CLI reference. The 3 required options are your OpenAPI spec path, output directory, and auth type. The auth header option lets you customize the header name for API key authentication. The filter option is powerful. If your spec has hundreds of operations, you can generate only the subset you need by specifying comma-separated tag names. The validate flag runs a full type check on the generated code before returning. MCP-gen supports 3 authentication patterns out of the box. API key authentication sends a configurable header, by default, XAPI key, with the key stored in the API key environment variable. Bearer token authentication uses the authorization header with a bearer token from the API token environment variable. And if your API doesn't need authentication, use none. All auth configuration is environment variable based, so credentials never appear in the generated code. Here's what MCP-gen produces. The generated server has a clean structure. The main entry point is src index.ts. That's what you point your MCP client at. Each API operation gets its own file under src tools named after the operation ID. src auth.ts contains all your authentication and connection configuration, driven by environment variables. You also get a README auto-generated from your OpenAPI spec, so your generated server has documentation from day one. Connecting to Claude Desktop is straightforward. You just add an entry to your MCP server's configuration in Claude Desktop's settings. Point it to the Node.js binary and the path to your generated server's entry point. Then pass your credentials as environment variables. Claude Desktop will automatically pick up all the tools your server exposes and let Claude use them in conversation. If you're working with a large API, like GitHub's API with hundreds of operations, you don't have to generate all of them. Use the filter option with comma-separated tag names that match your OpenAPI specs tags. This generates a focused server with only the tools you actually need, keeping it lean and manageable. MCP-gen supports a comprehensive range of OpenAPI features. It handles the full OpenAPI 3.0 specification, including JSON request and response bodies, all parameter types, path, query, and header. Complex schemas with all of, one of, and any of are resolved correctly. Enum values and nullable fields are supported, along with format validation for common types like email, UUID, URL, and datetime. If your spec doesn't have operation IDs, MCP-gen generates them automatically. And every request includes a timeout and a descriptive user agent header. MCP-gen v1 has some intentional limitations worth knowing. It targets OpenAPI 3.0 specifically. 3.1 and older Swagger specs need conversion first. Output is TypeScript only, which fits most MCP clients well. auth 2 isn't included. For that, obtain a token manually and use bearer auth. File uploads, streaming, and HTTP SSE transport are v2 targets. Everything is Stio-based, which works for all major MCP clients, including Claude Desktop and Cursor. The use cases are broad. Internal API integration is a big one. Instead of building custom integrations, generate an MCP server from your internal API spec and give your team AI access to your services overnight. Third-party APIs are equally powerful. Stripe, GitHub, Notion, and Linear all have OpenAPI specs, so you can have Claude working with all of them in minutes. And legacy APIs that weren't designed for AI become AI-ready without any code changes on the API side. Here's what MCP-gen is built with. Commander Joy.js handles CLI argument parsing. The Swagger parser package parses and validates OpenAPI specs. Handlebars generates the TypeScript code from templates. The generated servers use Zod for runtime input validation. Everything is written in TypeScript with strict mode enabled, and it requires Node.js 20 or later. MCP-gen is a $99 one-time purchase. You get unlimited use. Generate as many servers as you want. And critically, all generated code is yours completely. There's no restrictions on what you do with the output. Modify it, distribute it, build products with it. The commercial license is included in that price. Links are in the GitHub repo. Ready to get started? Install MCP-gen globally with npm. Run the help command to see all options, then point it at any OpenAPI 3.0 spec. The GitHub repo has the full documentation, and if you hit any issues or have feature requests, open a GitHub issue. The maintainer responds. That's MCP-gen. If you work with APIs and AI tools, this is the fastest path from idea to working MCP integration. Check out the GitHub repo, give it a try, and open an issue if you have feedback. Thanks for watching.